I just still wanted to have one response from you based on our previous conversation that we had with you, which was overwhelmingly positive. It reached a large sections of people from across the globe, and we received a lot of emails. Some of them were from people of Taiwan who watch our show and otherwise like our show. And I just wanted to ask you one question that we repeatedly got, particularly from some people of Taiwan, not everyone. And they said that we generally like your show, but in this case, you did not address our concerns, and they mean Taiwan's concerns with the mainland. They spoke, I think if I could remember correctly, they spoke about freedom of religion. They spoke about electoral democracy. Yes, freedom of religion, electoral democracy, and free speech. Of course, we had our own response. We spoke about how the case between Tibet and Taiwan is very different, because in Tibet, it was a case of religion with power, which is not the case in Taiwan. So we don't see any reason why things like freedom of religion can go on under one nation, two systems. We also spoke about Hong Kong, etc. But if you could share your views on that line of criticism that we got from people in Taiwan in particular to our discussion.
Well, obviously, a lot of people are concerned about the way of life in Taiwan. And if there were an eventual unification, will the unique way of life, which is different from mainland China, be preserved? Will we enjoy the kind of freedom that we currently have? There are two responses to that. The one is we currently are losing some of our freedom. If you live in Taiwan and you are open-minded enough, you can see that our freedom as protected by the Constitution has been encroached in many aspects, including freedom of association, which is political participation, and so on and so forth. There is a new party law that allows the DPP government to actually cease operation of over 100 political parties and 40 over political organizations. They're just rescinded their original registration. If we think about freedom of speech and freedom of the press, you can actually observe that space being encroached, starting from CTI's license being rescinded to a lot of direct involvement or direct intervention in the freedom of speech, which is a little bit like the US FCC chairperson directly threatened ABC and Disney on Jimmy Kimmel's show. So, I think freedom of speech everywhere has been encroached, especially by the power that be. But having said that, there are a lot of great and wonderful things in Taiwan that people would love to keep. So if we just examine the 3-4 different places, Hong Kong was returning to China. So all the laws, with the exception of basic law, are exactly identical with what the rest of China has, with the exception of basic law. So it's obviously not a very good example of what, if you want to preserve certain freedom in Taiwan, would be. And if you look at Tibet and other places, they were always a part of China. So you have political dissident, you have religious dissident, and there are struggles and a lot of political comeback on that. I don't profess that know all the details and have all the facts, but I do know that from my direct contact in Tibet and in Xinjiang, their current way of life is a little better than before, actually a lot better than before. So there were some balancing power in those places. But again, it's part of China, even though it's just an autonomous or a minority autonomous region. Now let's take a look at Taiwan's situation. Taiwan, even though in the constitutional sense, it's part of China, but it's not under the PRC government rule. It's not under the Communist Party rule. So I think the better analogy may be the newly formed Hainan district. Hainan, as a free port, has a lot of laws different from the rest of the China, because they are trying to have an open zone, which would give them certain freedom in many different ways. So even though they don't touch the basic foundation of what we talked about, like religious freedom and freedom of speech, but Hainan may be a model that if we were to negotiate a future of unification, then what is the two systems in Taiwan? The Taiwan system can be using certain legal framework to define, rather than having it absorbed into mainland China like Hong Kong and having only one basic law. So while this is still developing and evolving, we are observing what's happening to Hainan with keen interest. Hopefully that will provide another model of how we may preserve what Taiwanese love and cherish, our way of life, but also prevent war and have a larger economic participation, joining in the overall ascendance of Asia, Asia Pacific, Asia, and the rest of global South may have an opportunity, and Taiwan may go through China and participate the entire just mobilization as well as the rising of the global South. And that will be a very exciting future. So once again, we don't have all the future in our hands, but if with wisdom and willingness and the ability to not go into war and destruction, then we can have certain forum discussions to talk about potential solutions of the future. It may just start as a very small mustard seed, but it can grow into a potential blueprint.
Recently, when I was in Beijing, I spoke to a journalist, but who's been very close to some of the party officials. His father was in military, and we discussed about Taiwan and mainland. And one of the things I told him was that an aggressive hawkish policy from the mainland is not a good strategy, because we are talking about the same people, we are talking about the same nation, and the mainland has to, it's a tough thing to do, but it has to somehow make a distinction between its defensive but somewhat hard, increasingly hard policy against American sphere in its backyard, which I think is justified. The mainland is justified to push back against, but not let that axe fall on Taiwan, because we are talking about the same people. But at the in the same way, I tend to talk to people from Taiwan that Taiwan should bargain very hard about its things that it values, the things it wants to preserve. But one of the foremost things to do that is to not indulge in a military war with the mainland at the behest of the Americans. The mainland would be more likely to give more and more concessions as long as they don't come up as riding on the back of the Americans and thinking of a military solution to this long history. Final closing comments on for you, and we'll leave it there.
I'm glad that you mentioned the potential for negotiation. The number 1, 2, 3 of negotiation is if you were to engage in principal negotiation, you must have trust and respect of your opponent across the table. And I think currently the DPP doesn't have the trust and respect from mainland China, so it's very hard to engage in any kind of negotiation, unlike what I said earlier during 2008 and 2016. So to avoid a potential catastrophic future, it is important to have people that can represent Taiwan, but also be respected and trusted by mainland China. And that's number 1. Number 2 is in a principal negotiation, it is important to have your objective clear. For example, we say we want to have Taiwan's way of life maintained. What do we really care about? What do we want to see as having a guarantee? What kind of KPI may there be? What kind of guarantees are we seeking? You cannot just say we want everything in Taiwan to stay as is, which is not going to be an opening position of a negotiation, but you must lay it out, and people in Taiwan must have consensus on laying out what's important for us. I think a lot of this soul searching has been hidden under the really big talk of an independent Taiwan with backstop of the United States and Japan. And most recently, the president even said the Taiwan peace and stability is guaranteed by Abe, who said if Taiwan had something happened, it would happen to Japan. And we all know that it was just talk. But the current president seemed to attribute everything, including the peace, stability, and the status quo of Taiwan Strait, to Abe, and even taken a Japanese position of the end of Second World War, saying it's the ending of the war and not a complete surrender of Japanese military forces. So I think in Taiwan, we have a lot of way and work to do in order to prepare ourselves to a position that mainland China is willing to negotiate with us. But at the same time, mainland China has a lot of different fractions. You have different people. You have a lot of people saying, oh, no, we are so impatient with Taiwan. Let's just go through a military action and we're going to take them back in a day. Such a hawkish talk doesn't help us to move in your direction. That is, we don't kill each other. We don't have bloodshed. We don't have hatred coming from the bloodshed across Taiwan Straits. If we were to respect our history, the only logical position is to end a civil war in a peaceful manner. And ending the civil war certainly requires a lot of wisdom, but a lot of strong leadership.
We'll leave it there, Dr. Lei. This was a fascinating conversation about geopolitics covering Asia Pacific, but we were also glad we were able to bring in some internal dynamics of Taiwan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。